Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the regular council meeting of the Township of Malahide on August 3rd. And I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll begin with disclosure of pecuniary interest. Seeing none, we'll move to the approval of the previous minutes, July 20th. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, Clerk Adams.
That the minutes of the regular meeting of council held on July 20th, 2023 be adopted as printed and circulated.
Mover and seconder. Serna, Councillor Wilson, all in favor? Carried. We have a couple of presentations this evening. The first one is from Stephanie Saros from the County of Elgin about our annual emergency management exercise. Welcome, Stephanie.
Okay, I think I'm set up now. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mayor and councillors, for inviting me here to present, as well as I want to thank Chief Spoor and Adam for inviting me here. At Elgin County, we are a team of 3 in the Department of Emergency Management. Andrea Loughlin is the manager of emergency management. And then we have Marlene Welsh, and she is the administrative assistant. And then myself, Stephanie Saros, and I concentrate solely on emergency management, and I am your CEMC, as well as Elgin County and 4 other municipalities. So jumping in, I'm just going to start with a little bit of a background before we get into the emergency exercise or the mock exercise, so you understand the reasoning behind why we do it and some of the acts that are the legislation and what is involved with that. So the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act is a critical piece of legislation, and it outlines the framework for emergency management professionals to develop and implement effective emergency management programs. And this act serves as a guide for us, and it provides all those guidelines and the necessary guidelines and procedures for managing both emergencies and protecting the public. So one of the key aspects of this act is that it mandates specific courses and certifications for individuals to become an emergency manager. And these courses ensure that professionals acquire the essential knowledge and skills that are needed to effectively manage emergency situations and coordinate response efforts. So furthermore, the Act emphasizes emergency management professionals must operate within parameters of this legislation, which means that the actions and decisions should align with those directives. And it also provides that framework which we base all these programs and these exercises off of. So in addition to establishing the framework and the certification requirements, the Act also stipulates certain items that must be reviewed, completed, and addressed annually for compliance purposes. And these requirements may vary based on specific guidelines provided within the Act, but generally they encompass all the essential the components such as our risk assessments, which is known as the HIRA. So that's a hazard identification risk assessment, the emergency response plan, training exercises, and public education. So what could be coming from the province? This is something that's great to know and have as a background for us as a CEMC and professionals in the field. Emergency managers have these guidelines and items to address. So what's next? And with the EMO and several changes and with the budget announcement that has recently happened, there's significant changes that are occurring and are going to be occurring, which will trickle down to not only county level, but lower tier municipalities as well. One of these significant changes is that they are hiring 24 additional field officers in Ontario. So these individuals play a crucial role In supporting emergency management efforts across the province, the field officers typically work directly with local communities. They provide guidance, training. They also help coordinating during emergencies, and they're our conduit to the provincial government and the ministries as well. Their presence helps strengthen our response capabilities and ensure a consistent and adherence to the emergency management guidelines and best practices. In addition to the field officers, there's a newly created audit positions. And these positions have been approved in and implemented within the Emergency Management Ontario, or EMO, this year. The audit positions are designed to assess and evaluate emergency management programs, such as the one that we run for Malahide, the county, and the other municipalities. And it just ensures that compliance are within the established standards and identifying areas for improvement. The audits will help identify gaps. They'll enhance some of our preparedness and contribute to the overall effectiveness of the emergency management in the province. These changes within EMO reflect a commitment to continuous improvement and strengthening the emergency management capabilities across Ontario. The addition of the field officers and the audit positions will provide valuable support, and they'll also help guide local communities, organizations, and promoting coordinated effort for all. As emergency managers, it is important for us to stay informed about these changes and actively engage with EMO to leverage their expertise and resources whenever we run into a situation of an emergency, which could be a larger scale to a smaller scale type of emergency. Collaborating with EMO and the field officers, again, will strengthen our local response, our management programs, and then ensure the alignment with provincial guidelines and standards. So these are our current legislative requirements. This is what we actually input into the compliance portal every single year. And we have to meet each one of these requirements to receive compliance. I will let you know, Malahide did receive compliance last year. We got the letter earlier this year, as well as I believe the mayor would have received that letter as well. So these pieces just are going to reinforce that compliance aspect, and you'll see there's the annual exercise as well. But in order to activate the annual exercise and what's involved in that, there's two specific groups that are extremely important to mention and to distinguish. We have the Emergency Management Control Group, and then we have the Emergency Management Program Committee. So understanding what makes these different will allow us to be more focused and have an effective approach to reviewing and updating any compliance requirements. I had the opportunity earlier this year, after talking with our field officer, to receive some feedback on what we submitted last year for compliance, and so what changes we can move forward with. So with these two groups, in the short kind of story, the Municipal Emergency Control Group, they operate during an emergency. Whereas the Emergency Management Program Committee, they help develop the program that is used to operate during an emergency. That's the key distinction between the two. And the control group is the essential component for during that situation, which the key decision makers and representatives from various areas come together to make some of those crucial decisions quickly and effectively. We also have the control group, which helps review all these legislative requirements to ensure that they're up to date, to ensure that we have the right people in place. And after an annual exercise, what we like to do is review that program to make sure anything that came out of that exercise is then implemented, changed, updated, enhanced within that emergency management program going forward. So the CEMC can strengthen this coordination and effectiveness of the control group during an emergency, while at the same time, the program committee can develop and maintain a robust program which aligns with the best practices and the legal requirements. So, oh, I'm a little behind on my slide there. Sorry about that. So I get the question, what is the role of the CEMC and where does Elgin County come into this, as I am based out of Elgin County? And how does emergency management get assisted from our level as the CEMC, and how we work with the partners within our lower tiers as well? So the Community Emergency Management Coordinator plays a crucial role in the emergency management by acting as a liaison. I think that's the biggest piece, is where we facilitate those partnerships among various stakeholders. So we work with local emergency responders, we work with volunteer groups, we work with provincial ministries through our field officers, and we use those resources to come together and make sure that we're able to respond as quickly and efficiently as possible. So there's further breakout of these roles and what we do. One of them is that partnership building, where we establish those partnerships and make sure that they're always relevant. Whether we need to build in different agreements that we can work with them, we take that into consideration. We also look for expertise and identify who those experts might be during an emergency, and making sure that we've aligned with enough experts in the field that we'll always be able to have somebody that we can call on. We liaison with the provincial authorities, so we are that point of contact to make sure that we are able to ask and request any help that might be needed through the province. We also help develop and implement some of the public education initiatives. So if you've seen some of the social media, the number of alerts that we have put out within the last year, a little year and a bit, have increased dramatically. We have an emergency preparedness week, which we had a campaign to reach out to all the communities, and we are always ensured to include the different municipalities as we do this and make sure it's specific to those municipalities as well. We recently did some training at one of the Terrace Home long-term care homes with fire extinguishers. So it's making sure that we are always out in the public, engaging with the public, and making sure we're providing them with knowledge of what to do during an emergency and what they can do from an individual level. We do the exercise facilitation. So we facilitate the annual exercise, which we practice the response procedures. We test communication through that. We identify areas for improvement. The exercises really help enhance our readiness and making sure that the coordination of the community during these emergencies are what the community members actually need. So as long as we practice it, we're able to move forward with getting better each year with these exercises. The program review and compliance, we do the regular review every single year. It is required as well. And then after that review, we have to submit everything into the provincial government for compliance with that. So through the CMC support and assistance, the Emergency Management Department in Elgin County strengthens the capacity of the municipalities and contributes to a comprehensive and well-coordinated emergency management program. Our efforts are aiming to ensure safety and resilience of the community, especially in the face of emergencies. So hazards are our building block. This is where we start, and we build programs around hazards. So Ontario has identified 3 different areas. So the natural hazards, the technological hazards, as well as the human-caused hazards. I know there's been a few in Malahide. We've experienced some in Elgin County as well. So from that technological side of having a cyber attack to some of the flooding that's happened or the bridges that have collapsed. So those are all different areas where we consider and we have to make sure we're able to act. So the Ontario has grouped hazards into these 3 areas. And then we kind of question ourselves, what do we think the top 10 hazards are in Malahide? And this is how we have to prioritize our program and build out our program. It's important to note that hazards are based on the local risk assessments that we do, which is that HIRA I had mentioned earlier. So we have input and professional expertise that we can reach out to make sure that we have a robust program where we're able to actually activate what our plan is based on these hazards. We go to the management officials, we do the hazard assessments, we involve the community, we talk to individuals and groups such as conservation authorities to make sure that we're acting and we have plans in place that are relevant. And from that, when we take the approach to analyze the hazards, and I realize some of this is small, but we're going to build on what the HIRA actually looks like. We can critically address 5 pillars that act as our components of a comprehensive emergency management program. which is prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And this could mean everything from public education to strategic training and partnership building and agreements. So within prevention, we implement measures to prevent or reduce the likelihood of hazards and their associated impacts. So that could be something like public health campaigns or making sure that the water quality monitoring, when it changes, that we are notified as one of those prioritized individuals so that we understand what that looks like moving forward. We also have mitigations. We implement strategies to minimize the potential consequences. Again, some of these early warning systems or some developing evacuation plans. We go into preparedness, which is enhancing community preparedness and readiness to effectively respond to hazards. And this is the development of our emergency response plan. It's conducting training, and drills, it's establishing communication plans, and just ensuring access to essentials during the time of an emergency. So this is what a HIRA will typically look like, where we have to rank some of our hazards. And again, it's small, but this is what you would review when we come together for these exercises. From a response, we coordinate and execute response efforts during emergency, protect lives, property, environment, which again includes activating our emergency operations center, making sure there's a spot for the group to come together to make decisions and talk through these emergencies. We can help coordinate search and rescue operations by bringing in other agencies that might be able to assist with that. And a big piece is communicating vital information to the public. How do we get that information out to the public in a timely and efficient manner, and making sure that the truth is continuously shared so we can stay on top of what the emergency is? It rolls into the recovery piece, where we support the community in recovery and restoring normalcy after a hazard. So this again would be making sure that if there's mental health support, so that we have people in place that are around for that. We do post-disaster reviews to learn from the event. And by implementing these measures under each pillar, Malahide can strengthen its overall emergency management program and assure a comprehensive approach to addressing these identified hazards. It is crucial to regularly review this. Obviously, we have just lived through a major pandemic. A pandemic wasn't in a top 10 list for anybody. So this is something where going through these type of emergencies, we then reevaluate what our risks are and where they would fall within our top 10. So this comes down to the exciting part, the annual exercise. This year, after discussions with a number of people, we are going to move forward with a mock exercise for Port Bruce flooding. So what this involves, it involves what we are calling a tabletop exercise. So last year, the Malahide and its control group was invited to Elgin County to take part in an exercise for a cyber attack type of situation. So this year, because we are working with Malahide exclusively and addressing the risk that's in their area, we are addressing the Port Bruce flooding. As I said, we started with this design of a tabletop exercise. Last year was a discussion base, so we are slowly building on what these exercises look like. So as we start as a discussion, the next year or this coming year will be the tabletop, where we'll be sitting around a table to discuss what that is. The following year, we could include potentially tabletop with some field pieces to that. And then the following year can be a full field exercise. But as long as we're able to build on that base, oops, I don't know if I hit that. If we're able to build on that base and we are able to continuously have a more comprehensive program, that when we do these exercises, we're able to respond in a manner that's efficient. And we want to make sure before we jump to any huge field exercise that we have the pieces in place. The plans have been reviewed and we feel confident in moving forward when we go to that aspect of it. After these exercises are completed and done, we always want to make sure we debrief and we analyze. So when we have these sessions at the end, we want feedback. We want insights from the participants. When we have these actions taken during the exercise, we can then evaluate the effectiveness. We can address the flood scenario and the actions from 2022, but also historically, what was done? What did we change? What would we want to change going forward? And especially putting this into an exercise play, then we can start to come up with solutions and aid in our efficiency with that and communications to the public, communications internally, and what those pieces look like. We're then going to review, we're going to update after that exercise is complete. And we're going to go through those same questions and pieces again so that we can change our plans moving forward. We can change what those risk assessments look like. If we need a different type of aspect added into the communications plan, we can do that as well. But we also want to identify what we've done well, because we can then build on what we've decided was a positive aspect and further use that with other emergencies that may come into play. As much as we use one emergency for this mock exercises, many aspects that go into that specific emergency can actually be utilized for other emergencies. So we want to not forget that as we review, as we take back, as we receive feedback and insights, we can then continue on with that. We want to always document lessons learned and have these electronic files from years ago that we can continue to reflect back on, and making sure if we tried that this year and we decided it didn't work, but it came up as a suggestion the 2, 3, 4 years down the road, why was that not used? What happened there? What were the decisions? Maybe now we have the resources and availability to use that suggestion again and maybe make some changes or kind of rework how we had done that. So we always want to make sure we document those lessons learned. So by following these steps, Malahide can leverage the experience gained from historical flooding, the 22 flood, and continually improve its emergency plans and build a more comprehensive program. I know I keep saying this, but that's what we want to do. We want to have a robust program that hits all the key parts, which is public education, which is the, practicing the exercise, which is making sure our plans are reviewed and up to date, that we understand those critical infrastructure pieces that we need to pay attention to should these major emergencies come into play. And so it is important to recognize that each situation will differ, and no plan can account for every possible scenario, although we will try. These exercises can test, we can evaluate, and we can adapt plans to be better prepared for a range of all kinds of emergencies. I should have put that up there for you guys. By actively engaging in these exercises, reviewing the outcomes, and taking proactive measures to address and identify these areas for improvement, Malahide can strengthen its emergency management program and enhance its ability to effectively respond to future instances. And ultimately, we're here to help the community. So that's what we want to be prepared to do. And that's it. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thank you so much.
All right,
Questions? Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wondered, what did you mean by field exercises?
Yes, sorry, I should have specified that a little more. What we would do in a field exercises is our fire department, our police partners would actually be out on the road, possibly closing roads. They would be out if we're doing something down by Port Bruce. We would have the department out there in the field. So we wouldn't be around a table discussing. We would actually have them activated. So we would have almost like actors out there so that they can, simulate some type of emergency that they have to act to. We would keep the control group in the Emergency Operations Center, but we would ultimately have our partners who would typically respond to the incident out there. We would do phone calls to the PEOC, which is the Provincial Emergency Operations Center, tell them that it's a test, but see how that messaging would travel back and forth. So it would just be physically actually doing the mock exercise versus either a tabletop or discussing it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Councillor Leach.
So my question is more along the timelines. Why is the timeline a year between each? Is there any way to tighten it up? Because in 4 or 5 years, what you're practicing for could already have conceivably occurred.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is the risk that you take, because we never know when emergency is going to come. We are required through the act to do an annual emergency. So that's one emergency per year where we have to conduct it. So you know, even from a field exercise, the amount of planning that would have to go into that and the coordination would almost take a year to actually plan and coordinate. Even a tabletop to get that piece all together. It's quite a bit to actually plan and execute these exercises. So because we're required to do one per year, that's kind of why the spacing is what it is. Yeah, no problem.
Any further questions? So did I hear correctly that, so this year we would do a tabletop on Port Bruce flooding, and then next year we would consider a simulation also on flooding?
It depends. Yeah, it really depends kind of what the decision is made each year. So if that's a progression that we want to make, because that's how the exercises in the program plan is going to go, then we can definitely choose to do the Port Bruce flooding again as a partial tabletop, partial field exercise. But again, there's that top 10 hazard list. So you almost, again, when you go through these exercises and you practice these different scenarios, they can translate into other hazardous events that might occur as well. So it's always good to be practiced for a variety of incidences that might occur. But ultimately, it would be up to the individuals to make some of these decisions of what exercise they would like to see each year. So when I go around to each municipality, usually I meet with CAO or other individuals that make some of these decisions and ask them what they would like to do and how they'd like to conduct their exercise. But we do recommend and strongly suggest to do a progression.
So a progression from table to.
Yeah, so
field.
discussion-based tabletop with a little bit of field, and then you kind of can go into a fuller field type of exercise. Yeah.
So with that decision, when you've met with the key individuals, would that
Mhm.
decision then come to council for consideration, approval? So this is the plan and.
Yeah, it doesn't have to go to council. So typically the decision is made what exercise it will be, and then we start planning from there. So it isn't anything that has to go through council to make that decision. But again, we are always here to refer to what you would like. So when we talk to individuals, if that's something that is wished to go forward. I don't always recommend it because then we can kind of use what we have in the plans and use that form to going forward. The control group is made up of a number of individuals as well as the program committee that are deep into both the program and the plans. So it's always good to have their insight to what they'd like to see after doing and taking part in these exercises.
Yeah, I think it would be good to be as inclusive as possible in the
Absolutely.
decision-making process so that it's clear why we chose this, or there's an opportunity to communicate that even though we may be focusing on this emergency or this risk, whatever we learn from here is going to be applicable to
Yeah.
everybody else. So we're not just concentrating on just one area of the
Yeah.
township, for example.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, so the more we can make that process transparent and.
Yeah, I mean, and again, we'll always, enlist what people would like to do, and then they can, again, share that information, further make decisions. But we typically come to, I would say, the beginning of summer, maybe late spring, where we ask what that looks like. If it is something like a field exercise, that will be much earlier and planned so that we can have that opportunity to do a field exercise well. But yeah, definitely.
Councillor Glinsky.
Mayor Jaguar, the command center, would that be, if we're talking about the ice at Port Bruce, would it be the trailer at the Half Moon Corner, or would it be in the township office?
Do you want me to take that one?
Sure.
It's at
Yeah,
the fire hall.
go ahead. Yeah.
It'll be at the fire hall at the South Station. The trailer limits our communication because of the, we still use the trailer as an operations center at the flood. And in and out of the flood area, but the communications in the area in the building, the fire hall itself is more suited for emergency control center, so.
What you like to do in Emergency Operations Center is have the ability to hook up your computer. You need to be able to show maps, and have if somebody can't make it in person, then we can connect to a Zoom meeting. So you almost want to have your operations center within a building so that you're able to, make decisions basically. And then at the scene, it'd be something like that.
Follow up?
Just to follow up, will staff be involved as much as they used to be if there was an emergency from the township office, or would it be just the fire department and people that are not at the office but out in the?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what the control group are the individuals that respond to the Emergency Operations Center. So the control group is typically your executive leadership team and some other individuals that will be asked to come to the operations center to help make those decisions. So it's definitely staffing. Typically the fire department and the chief will be a major aspect of that, but they will be responding most likely to the actual incident. I know Chief Sporer, though, is one of the alternates, so he will definitely be involved.
Well, there are no further questions. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Very important and informative. So it sounds like we'll continue to be in touch. Next, we have another presentation from Ms. Hunter from the St. Thomas Elgin Local Immigration Partnership.
Thank you. I think I'm on. Yes.
Yes.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to give you some updates, to introduce myself. It's been a few years since I've been able to do the full circuit of all the lower tier municipalities. It's been quite a ride. So my name is Patricia Hunter, and I am the manager for the St. Thomas Elgin Local Immigration Partnership. We also refer to ourselves as STELIP, and it's much shorter, so I'll try and do that from now on. So we are a federally funded project that was established in the community in 2011. There are similar projects across Canada. There's about 80 of them in different communities. And what we are a community capacity building project to help support the integration of immigrants. We do not directly serve immigrants. We have two wonderful settlement service offices in our community. One of them housed in Elmer at Mennonite Community Services, and the second co-housed with us at the YWCA in St. Thomas, the YWCA Settlement Services. So our role is more to work with different agencies, different partners to create things that can help the communities. It sounds very abstract, and hopefully through some of my examples, you can get a better sense of what we do. Our vision is that St. Thomas and Elgin County communities will be culturally diverse, welcoming, caring, and inclusive community that will retain current residents, welcome newcomers, and provide them the opportunity to successfully integrate, contribute to, and benefit from social, cultural, and economic inclusion. Basically, we want immigrants to be part of our community. We want the community to work together and everyone thrive. We currently have about, I think it's 18 members. We're always in fluctuation, but we have representation across all sectors. We have like our health sectors, we have employment sectors, we have the police from St. Thomas. We also have some special interest groups like the St. Thomas Islamic Center. We're always welcoming new people to sit at our table, but we can also partner with you if you're not part of our council. So they help direct the way that we do our work, but not necessarily who we partner with on one-on-one projects. Our work has been divided into 5 areas, and I'll go through them really quickly just so you can get a better sense. So our first one is workforce development and employer supports. Today, we actually hosted a session with Will Employ for local employers to get access to supports to better recruit and retain immigrant clients. That's a project that's ongoing for our region, and we always are looking for more companies that might want to get access to those free services. We also look at things like, are the newcomers who are in our community, are they ready to integrate into our workforce? So ensuring that our local employment agencies have the supports to help them update their resumes to be more suited for the Canadian environment. Under the community readiness, we're looking at our general population. Do they understand what diversity is? Do they have the tools to welcome people who may be from different cultures that they may not have worked with before? We've done a lot of public awareness campaigns. We try and participate in events and activities. Last month, we were at the children's picnic, I think is the new name, and in Elmer, and it was a really great opportunity for us to connect with families and to start talking about some of these topics. We also look at things like equitable supports. So that's, do our current service providers have the access to the tools that they need to provide an equitable model of support? So that looks more at, are people getting the supports they need as to get the same outcomes as our Canadian and our more established people? We look at things like education. Are there enough education activity or opportunities? This looks at not only English language classes, but also are there some information sessions that could help and inform our newcomer clients? I have a little bit of an update for that one, but we'll go through it in a second. And the last one is civic and social inclusion. So is that, are our immigrants volunteering? Are they finding the opportunities to find a pathway to sit on our council? So after they become Canadian citizens, do they understand that they too could have a path to making decisions for the community? One of the things that we've also been doing as of late is trying to get more local research. We understand that there's a lot of research that exists, but nothing that really helps us understand our community. At the tail end of COVID, we did a study about the experiences of discrimination, and we had 406 people participate in the study, and about just under 200 of them were identified as immigrants or racialized people. So this is people who were born outside of Canada or visibly fall into one of the racialized categories. And what we found in this study was that 7 in 10 of the racialized or immigrant people had said that they had experienced discrimination in our community in the last 3 years. And these are from everything from getting jobs to interacting with neighbors on their street or using public spaces. So this is a big concern. When we did the presentations across the community, we were asked questions about, but what is it that they're experiencing? So we partnered again with Western, and we're currently conducting the second phase of that research, which are in-depth 90-minute interviews for people who have experienced discrimination in some form or other, and would like to share that story so we can build a better understanding and help develop some sort of protocols or toolkits that can help employers or the community to implement some strategies to mitigate this. In June, we conducted a immigrant survey, and this was more of a generic survey looking to see what supports are being accessed by our current immigrant population, what that experience looks like. We're also asked some discrimination questions, and also questions about like, what could we do better or what is missing from our community? So I was actually just in the office, just trying to compile that data, working on that. So once the report is finalized, I will be sharing it here as well through an email, because I'm only allowed one delegation a year. We recently created a resource guide called Culturally Inclusive Events Guide. And this is something that we saw as we're seeing more and more diversity come into our community. We've had more and more comments from people saying, I don't think that was right, or we don't necessarily feel that was a space for us. So we created this as it's not meant to be a checklist. It's not meant to be a do this, not that. It's meant to pose questions to help people who are planning events that are meant for the entire community, to give them the ideas or the tools to think through how someone else might be experiencing it. So this is a free guide. We've also developed a training that can go with it. So we would invite you to share that with the community as they are doing events. The St. Thomas Special Events Committee now has it on their website, and we're looking to see how we can implement it into their special events process. So that's something we would absolutely welcome to do in partnership with you as well. In 2012, we created a package. We found that our community is really great at creating directories and lists of phone numbers. But if people are new to a community or new to a country, they don't necessarily understand what it is offered in some of these services. So we created a information package, which is a quite extensive package that gives more understanding and meaning to some of the services that are offered, and also where they can go to get more resources or get support. So everything from how to apply for a driver's license to what you actually need in order to legally drive in Canada, all the way to like what are the names of local grocery stores, which are very visual. We distributed them to every single municipality, and a lot of municipalities cannot find their binder. So if you do know where it is, we have an update for it. If not, we can provide you with an extra copy, but it's also available in a PDF form, and it's something that is quite easy to attach to your website. I did want to go over some demographics just because it's good to understand what the reality is for you. And keeping in mind, these are numbers that came from the 2021 census. So the census has its flaws, but it's the best information we can get. So first things, hopefully everyone here knows you have just over 9,000 people who live in your community. You did see a modest growth in this census period, which was a real big difference from the census before. The previous census, you were one of the biggest non-metropolitan areas that were seeing people settling in from outside of the community. So this was absolutely a big shift, and no doubt it was due to impacts from COVID. The median age of this population is one of the highest, or it's pretty standard across the community. Bayam is 5 years younger than you, and I'm not sure how Bayam got so much younger, but you are pretty modest. You are lower than the Ontario average, which is 41.2. It on surface feels like a really weird number, but what it does when you understand your median age, you can understand how young your workforce is. So your labor force is typically in the age to 15 to 65. So when you have a median age that's in around 40, then you're having an older aging population, and that just leads to some workforce challenges that might be of concern. When we talk about where people are coming from and settling in this community, it should come as no surprise that we do have a lot of people who come from Mexico. And when we look at the census for our region, when we see Mexico, we don't typically think ethnic Mexicans. It's typically Low German speaking Mennonites. It is absolutely the largest proportion of settlers in this community. Just so you know, I have had many meetings with Stats Canada to try and improve the census so that we can increase and improve the numbers about this population specifically. We have huge data concerns when we're trying to understand the scope of the Low German speaking Mennonites in our region. But nonetheless, traditionally in this community, we are seeing Mexico, Netherlands, UK, Germany, and that is a very white population, which means topics of immigration are often underrepresented because it's not a visible piece that we're seeing. When we're looking at, I could only pull out 2 countries, and we had Philippines were coming up there. So it's really interesting to see that we are having a mix of some people finding this region. In terms of visible minorities, which is looking at the racialized population, it is amongst the lowest in the community, and it is astronomically lower than that of Canada and Ontario. Just so you can, or where's my numbers? So in Ontario, we're seeing about 34.3% of the population is racialized, and in Canada as a whole, it's 26.5. So there's a very big difference between who's settling in this region versus the province and the country as a whole. When we think about immigration, there's many different streams you can come into Canada. There's 4 distinct categories that typically we group. The economic immigration is the push that Canada has been making. It represents 60% of the people who are coming into the country. But if we're looking at this region, the economic immigrants is in the light green, and we'd had none in the latest census period. We had 75% of the people who were coming into our region, which was 420, oh no, I'm not sure how many people. Sorry, I'm missing a number. But it was 75% were from the family class. This is not necessarily surprising, where we have a lot of our Low German speaking Mennonites. There's often family reunification that's happening, but having no economic immigrants is something of concern. We do see a good number of the people who have come through as refugees, and this has something to do with some of the local churches who have been involved in some sponsorship. So another really interesting piece that has come out in the most recent census is the mobility. So when we think about mobility, this question asks 1 year ago, from 1 year previous to today, where did you live? And depending on how people responded, it tells you your mobility numbers. So I've pulled out the representation. So 520 people 1 year before the census did not live in Malahide. They could have moved from Elmer, they could have moved from St. Thomas or Bayham, but they didn't live here in Malahide. And then when you're looking at 5 years previous to that, we're looking at 26% or just over 2,000 people, which means 1 in 4 people who are living in Malahide and during the census year had not lived in this community before. Often in our region, we have this misconception that people come, stay, live, and there's not very much movement. These numbers really dispel that myth. We are a little bit higher than the provincial and the Canadian average, which are about 22%, 21% for the 5-year period. So it's absolutely something to note. People are finding this, but we're just finding some secondary migration and not necessarily immediate migration. So my last thing I wanted to close off on is the understanding that Canada has really committed to immigration as a strategy to build our workforce for post-COVID recovery. This year, they've talked about bringing in 465,000 new people. Next year, it's growing. And then in 2025, the expected is 500,000 new Canadians. And this does not count the temporary foreign workers, of which this part of the community absolutely sees a large number of that. I just pulled out stats for that today, 68.5% increase in the positive LMIAs from last year to this year, or from 2021 to 2022, which means we as a country are looking for temporary residents to fill our workforce needs. But as a community, we're not doing anything to attract the immigrants who are in the country to our community to help build up and support our jobs. So I wanted to share with you a resource that is free. It was developed locally and just out of Western. We did attach it to your notes, so I apologize for the large insert there, but it's a really incredible tool that can help this community understand how you measure in 19 different characteristics that create a welcoming community. And these aren't characteristics or aspects that are unique or only used by immigrants. When you look at these characteristics, it supports the families that are currently living here. It looks at everything from your amenities to transportation, which we know is a huge deficit in our community, but looking at our police and fire services, all those pieces. And they've outlined a tool and giving you examples or suggestions of what measures to use. And there's currently a toolkit that exists for you to take these measurements and use it to compare yourself to either neighboring communities or communities of comparable size, depending on how you would like to look at it. And the second piece that's coming out shortly will be how to use this information to market your community to immigrants or to new people who are settling in the region. So it's a tool that I think that even if you just take pieces of it, could really help you in your work as counselors. And being someone who loves data, I would absolutely love to support you as you are looking through and trying to make use of this tool. So I'm going to leave it there. We basically just giving you an invitation to make sure that you register and follow our information. We send out quarterly newsletters, but sometimes we give some upcoming pieces. So we send at most 12 emails a year, but I would say is probably closer to 6 or 7. So please find us on our website, connect with us. And if there's any projects that you would like to participate in, we would happily come to the table with you. We did an event at Springfield Library with the Springfield School many years ago, and the quilt that we created for our tour around the world is still hanging in the school and in the library. It's amazing that those memories are still brought back by people who have aged out of those systems. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Fascinating. Comments, questions? Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through to Patricia. You said the number 2,215 weren't there 5 years ago. How did we handle the housing, or how was the housing accommodated? Do you have any information on that?
Unfortunately, I don't, but this could just be people moving out and people, it's often like a shifting. So it doesn't tell you how many people necessarily left. It tells you how many people who are there on census day weren't living at that address before. And the numbers that I pulled weren't living in this community before. So it's not necessarily that you created new housing stock or that your population grew by that much. It just means that 225 people, 2,225 people weren't residents here 5 years previously.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Wilson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this, we have a bit of a problem as a rural municipality that we're supposed to preserve farmland and provide housing. Now, if we're supposed to be adding a new city of London of immigrants every year, that's a lot of extra people to house and feed and try not to expand on a farmland so that we can't feed who we've got already. It's sort of, well, I mean, it's scary seeing that 465,000 people each year are going to be coming into Canada.
Mhm.
It's like, where do you put all these people?
Absolutely. Yeah. The housing question is something that often comes up in immigration circles. This doesn't mean that the population of Canada is going to increase by 465,000 people. There are people who pass, and there are people who move out of the country. So this doesn't mean a population growth in Canada of that number. That just means that that's what's coming in through the immigration stream. It's much more complicated than that, but absolutely, housing is an issue. It's not something that is in our pocket. I have nothing to do with the numbers. The numbers are decided by the federal government. Our role as a community is to say, how can we leverage what's happening? How can we ensure that we maintain the vitality of our communities? If we don't have a population workforce that's growing, then unfortunately our businesses won't be able to thrive and maintain. So it's absolutely a struggle.
It's a challenge for sure. And I mean, I think on the bright side, for me, I remember back when we started paying attention to accessibility and how in the end, and it was focused on disability, but in the end, it actually benefited everybody from redesigning sidewalks and doors. We all use those tools. And I see this new push for and paying attention to inclusivity, I think will also have the benefit, like a benefit to everybody, not just groups. So this is good that the impetus is coming from immigrants, but it will be a benefit for all. So thank you for making this top of mind, and could be in touch because I know we have employers too who are struggling with vacancies. Any further comments or questions? Seems to be it for now. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
So may I have a resolution to receive both presentations, please?
That the following presentations be received for information: Stephanie Cyrus, County of Elgin's presentation relating to emergency management, and Patricia Huntar of St. Thomas Elgin Local Immigration Partnership presentation relating to community services offered by the organization be received.
Mover and seconder. Counselor Cerna, Counselor Leach, all in favor? Carried. And thank you again. Have a nice evening. Next, we have reports from departments. The first one, Director Spoor, Director of Emergency Services. Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Tonight's report involves the new emergency management plan bylaw and also the emergency management program bylaw. Our previous bylaw didn't have all the stuff that we had needed. So the report council gives details in regards to the new draft for this report. So during your emergency management review, which Stephanie said earlier, in our 2022 compliance, we received feedback from our field advisor that our bylaw was outdated and we need to reflect some legislative changes that have been made since our last bylaw, which has been in effect since 2011. Our CMC, Stephanie, has brought forward our draft bylaw used by other municipalities in the area and was then modified to reflect the needs of the township and be compliant with Emergency Management Ontario requirements moving forward. The few changes of this bylaw are as followed. So identifies the chair of the Emergency Management Committee as CAO. So before that wasn't a set role. So our CAO will be the chair of the Emergency Committee. And it identifies that there's an emergency information officer and that the position of manager of legislative services or the clerk will hold this position. It reflects that the emergency operations center locations have been established for us and for use by the municipal emergency control group in the event of an emergency. And identifies that we employ a training program that staff and other involved persons are knowledgeable and procedures for emergency response and recovery activities. Also that we deliver public education on risks to public safety and other public preparedness programs that we have identified with our risks. It better identifies the role of the CMC and the responsibilities in regards to the program, training, exercises, and public education. Names the fire chief as an alternate CMC in the absence of the CMC. Names the positions of both the Emergency Management Program Committee as well as the Emergency Control Group. These positions are listed to have clarity and have the needed resources available. Although in the past, we've had some challenges before with emergency management and being able to work with stuff with the county. I'd like to thank Stephanie for her help. And if there's any other questions on this bylaw, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you very much. It's a good bylaw to have in compliance. So good work on that. Any questions? If not, we'll receive the report and we'll consider the bylaw at the end of the meeting. So the report for now.
The report number F23-6 entitled Emergency Management Program and Emergency Response Plan bylaw be received.
Mover and seconder. Counselor Wilson, Counselor Leach, all in favor? Carried. Thank you again, Stephanie. And now from the Director of Public Works. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Woodner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Jeff, I just wanted to say congratulations. Looks like your Saved by the Beep program got some recognition, so good for you. One of the leaders and it helps. It's a good program, so never hurts to remind people of what needs to be done. So, thank you.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. It was when we went to the conference, the province is just looking at ways that we could reduce the fire deaths in Ontario. Last year, we had the highest rate that we have in the last 10 years. We're up to 133. Many children and many avoidable fires that were caused by the non-working smoke alarms. So we're really pushing this as a whole fire departments through the province for this year. Every year it's going to be we're going to try to do it the same day. So it'll be September 28th and we'll try to make it a thing. And it's going to lead into our Fire Prevention Week, which is in October. So this is sort of be the kick up into it. Other municipalities are also doing other fire department checks already. We're going to be doing some good program stuff here for leading up to this and as well as on the day of September 28th. For example, one of the fire departments in one of our neighboring cities, they get their crews at night. They're doing some door to door. One night on Tuesday last week, they did a thing in every house they checked. There was an issue with smoke alarms, every house. So we're trying to make sure that everybody has the ability to make sure they're safe. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for that update. Director Gopi, the report on the pilot radar speed sign program.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to council, this staff report on the pilot radar speed program is back to you basically with a drafted proposed locations that staff have compiled through input through council, through our roads operations and frequent areas where we experience speed issues, as well as with the Malahide Community Policing Committee have also reviewed this. Based on that, we've assembled a list and a map. It's probably a little easier to look at. That's on page 160 of your agenda package. With this, essentially, we're looking at a pilot program to deploy the speed radar sign across these various locations across the municipality. The plan, as staff have discussed, would be to look at these locations for a 2-week period. Essentially, we'd be putting out our existing Armadillo traffic counters for a 2-week period in advance of the speed radar sign, essentially to kind of get a gauge of what the traffic is like before you put up the sign, what the habits of the drivers are, and then keep that Armadillo up, put up the speed sign, leave it there for a week or two. It also collects data on number of cars, traffic, speeds, and the total volumes that are going to go through there. We can compare that with the Armadillo, which is there. And that'll kind of give us an idea as to, is this area truly a problem area, or is it more of just a perception? And is the sign showing up on site actually affecting the driver's habits and causing them to slow down? So that's the general plan of how we would roll this out. As I noted, we have 31 locations and we're talking 2 weeks at each. You can tell that quite quickly exceeds a year. This would also not be something that we would like to be doing during the winter season. Driver habits in winter time are usually different to begin with. Plus you run into a lot of potential maintenance issues with these units going through the winter season as well. Our staff are typically going to be out pushing snow rather than running around moving signs. So our proposal is essentially we will receive our sign in approximately 2 to 3 weeks. Give us till early September so we can play with it, figure out exactly how it's going to work and how we need to get it installed. And then starting in early September, we would start looking at implementation up until about mid-November in this fall. Then next spring, we would kick it off again and just keep going down our list of locations. So essentially, if council is good with that approach in general, we would just be looking for perhaps a little direction or prioritization on where we should be starting. If you look at our list, our first list was going to be on Imperial Road coming out of Port Bruce and kind of moving around that area. So Dexter Line, Springfield Road. We're going to kind of jump around a little bit so that, you know, it's a bit of a surprise to people, because it's better to catch them off guard with this, because then you're actually getting their true driving habits. So if there are any questions or comments or concerns, we will gladly take that into account and look forward to rolling out this program, in which we will report back on some of our preliminary findings through the winter months. We can bring that back and let you guys know how things are going.
Nice. Thank you for taking that on. Comments or questions, Councillor Wilson?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I have I guess, a couple of comments, I suppose more than questions, although 31 is a lot of locations. Any chance of knocking that down by about, like, take 10 off the list? And secondly, it's more of a comment. After seeing a list of 31, I understand why West Elgin has 2 of these.
Yeah, and I think we had talked about, we're not ruling out purchasing others, and we were gonna try, see if it appears to be making a difference, and then we could consider that perhaps a budget time. I think the policing, community policing committee has also said they'd be willing to perhaps contribute more, but let's start with one and see. And I agree. I think the list is accurate. I think the issue will be prioritization. And I could see, I know when we consulted with the committee, I don't think anyone realized that the numbering was also the sequence. and in which the sign was going to be installed. So I think the feedback I got after was for sure, Ron McNeil, I think Springfield West should be up high, much higher on the list, and hopefully as part of this pilot. So that's one I can flag. And I guess council either this evening or as a follow-up by email, we could send sort of, if we want to just reprioritize for what we want to do this fall as part of this pilot. Councillor Leach?
Through you, Madam Mayor. It's very disappointing that we have so many areas that people don't heed the current signs. I love the data-centered approach and learning from our drivers' habits. And it does speak to the fact that maybe a second or third unit would be helpful to help mitigate some of these very hazardous locations.
Anything else? And Director Gobby, you're okay if you receive emails from council as far as suggestions for top 10?
Yes, absolutely. Through you, Madam Mayor. We're very open. There's nothing, nothing firm here that we have to be worried about. I mean, at the end of the day, we're going to be ideally looking at installing on existing posts. So, I mean, once we have the unit, our ability to move these things around is very easy.
Great. So we have the resolution then.
So report number PW 23-47 entitled Pilot Radar Speed Sign Program be received, and that staff be directed to implement the pilot radar speed sign program as outlined in this report.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Lewis, Councillor Glinsky, all in favor? Carried. And I believe you have another report, this time the RFT award.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to council, report PW 2348 is the award of the paving for the walking path at the South Dorchester Community Hall. As you may be aware, there is a walking path in behind the building there in the open space. We put out we had an approved capital budget item to get that paved to improve the use of that site. We got an acceptable low bid of $24,499 from Peters Paving in Elmer. That fits within our approved capital budget of $35,000. And should council approve this, we can move forward with getting that paving done this fall. If there are any questions, I will gladly answer.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Leach?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Does that include removing the existing, or is that paving over what is there?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Leach, that is basically a light rehab. There's a gravel path there. It's going to take a little bit of additional prep work, which our staff will do some of that. And then Peters will come in and basically pave over the existing gravel base.
Great. There are no further comments or questions. The resolution.
The report number PW 23-48 entitled RFT Award South Dorchester Community Hall Walking Path Paving be received, and that Peters Paving be awarded the contract to complete the work.
Mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Widner, Councillor Leach, all in favor? Carried. Next, we have an application for consent to sever. And Mr. Steele is with us. I'll turn it over to you to go over the application, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Before council's consent application D10 E55-23, the subject lands at 51189 Broadway as a vacant residential parcel located in Springfield, and has been identified that the existing dwelling located on the adjacent residential lot to the west at 51181 Broadway a portion of that dwelling encroaches onto the subject lands. And so the purpose of this application is to permit the conveyance of land to facilitate a lot boundary adjustment in order to resolve this encroachment. The county official plan permits boundary adjustments, provided that the proposed lot addition would not result in the creation of a new parcel and would not impact the viability of the use of the property as affected. It's noted that the proposed application would not result in the creation of a new lot. However, it is noted that the proposed retained lands would become an undersized residential lot. And so staff required as part of an application submission that a building lot envelope be identified on the submitted site plan that would demonstrate that a dwelling could be sited on the proposed retained parcel and still meet minimum building setback requirements. And so that was provided as part of the application submission. I believe it's provided on page 180 of the agenda package. The Township of Malahide official plan designates property as residential and hazard lands, and a lot of adjustments are permitted provided they comply with all the applicable requirements of the official plan and zoning bylaw. Proposed lot boundary adjustment is for the purposes of conveying land that has been historically used by the adjacent property owner and would address this existing encroachment. Again, it's noted no new lot is proposed to be created. However, it's noted that the future development on the vacant retained parcel may require approval from the Conservation Authority. Subject lands are zoned Village Residential 1, the Township zoning bylaw, which requires a minimum lot area of 800 square meters and a minimum lot frontage of 20 meters. The proposed retained parcel would have a lot area of just under 600 square meters and a lot frontage of 19.3 meters. And so as a result, staff would recommend that a minor variance application be required as a condition of consent approval. Comments have been provided by public works staff on the proposed development. It was noted in the review of the application that there is some uncertainty as to the location of the existing sanitary sewer connection for the existing dwelling at 51181 Broadway, and that it may be located to the east of the dwelling where the proposed lot addition is proposed to take place. And so as it was recommended that as condition of approval, that verification be provided that the sanitary sewer connection is indeed located within the proposed boundaries of 51181 Broadway. Since the submission of this report, additional information has been received by staff that the storm sewer connection for the existing dwelling may also be located to the east of the dwelling. And so staff will recommend that condition 1 of the proposed recommending conditions on page 181 of the agenda package be amended to also include a requirement that verification be provided by the applicant that the storm sewer connection also be located entirely within the boundaries of the proposed enlarged parcel, and also provide further clarity that any relocation of these sewer connections would be the expense of the proponent. And so staff recommend that the consent application be supported, provided the recommended conditions are applied, and these be forwarded to the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration. And that concludes my presentation. Have any questions from members of council?
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Councilor Lewis.
More so just a comment, Eric. Want to thank you for the time and the conversation we had, and I can hear by your report that you covered the concerns of the constituent that is residing in that house to the property. So thank you for that, and thank you, Jason, for also for what you did.
Okay, so before calling the vote, so there is an amendment then to condition 1. I want to make sure everybody caught that. And if everyone's satisfied with that, we can go ahead with the resolution.
Staff report number DS 23-22 entitled Application for Consent to Sever Pauline Krigsman be received, and that the application for consent to sever Pauline Krigsman D10 E55-23 relating to the property located in lot 43, registered plan 78, Township of Malahide, County of Elgin, be supported for the reasons set out in this report, and that this report and amended conditions list be forwarded to the Land Division Committee for its review and consideration.
Mover and seconder. Counselor Zelinski, Counselor Leach, all in favor? And that's carried. Thank you, Mr. Steele.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Next, we have a presentation from our new bylaw enforcement officer, Mr. Miller. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, members of council, for having me here today. I don't seem to have the share button.
maybe just start and
Okay.
I'll try to get on and to do that for you.
Sorry, my apologies. I'm having some technical difficulties this evening. So thank you for having me here today. My name is Stephen Miller. I'm the newly appointed Shared Services by Law Enforcement Officer, Shared Services with the Township of Malahide and the Municipality of Bayham. A bit about me, I've been working in by law enforcement for approximately 21 years now. I started my career working in rural municipalities, being the Township of Tiny. I've also worked in large urban municipalities. I love the work. I love working with people, and I enjoy serving the people in the communities that I work. I'm a certified municipal law enforcement officer with the Municipal Law Enforcement Officers Association of Ontario. I'm certified level 2 property standards with the Ontario Association of Property Standards Officers. I am a licensed paralegal with the Law Society of Ontario and worked formerly as a municipal prosecutor for the city of Barrie. I'm a graduate of the public administration program at the University of Western Ontario, and I have a genuine passion for public service. So I'm happy to be here. So a bit about bylaw enforcement. What does a bylaw enforcement officer do? Bylaw enforcement officers respond to complaints related to violations of regulatory bylaws. We attempt to achieve voluntary compliance through collaboration, education, and enforcement if necessary. Bylaw enforcement activities are governed by several pieces of provincial legislation, being the Municipal Act, the Ontario Building Code, the Ontario Evidence Act, and Section 15 of the Police Services Act, which appoints municipal bylaw enforcement officers as peace officers. In short, we work with residents, businesses, and visitors, explain how and why bylaws apply, work with stakeholders to ensure voluntary compliance. Interpersonal communication is key, as well as written documentation. We try as hard as we can not to lay charges and work with people as much as possible to achieve compliance, but charges are a last resort, as well as remedial action. Bylaw enforcement officers work with external governmental agencies on cross-jurisdictional issues, including the Ontario Provincial Police, Ministry of Transport, the Ministry of Environment, and the OSPCA. I mentioned the term remedial action. What is remedial action? It's where a property is not in compliance, and essentially the bylaw enforcement officer has the authority to go ahead and do whatever we're requiring the person to do, and then bill that cost of that back in the same manner as municipal taxes. Essentially, we take action to remedy the issue of non-compliance. Is a bylaw enforcement officer a law enforcement officer? Essentially, yes, we are, by virtue of Section 15 of the Police Services Act. I don't like to think of bylaw enforcement as that. I like to think of bylaw enforcement officers more of as community problem solvers. We work with people to help troubleshoot the best solution related to a possible problem or an issue of non-compliance. On occasion, where charges are necessary, bylaw enforcement officers can issue tickets or summonses with a monetary fine attached. If the person appeals those charges, then trials are held in the Elgin County Ontario Court of Justice. At trial, bylaw enforcement officer swears an oath, provides oral testimony, and brings any evidence associated with an investigation. It's very important that we take people's rights into account. Why is bylaw enforcement important? Bylaw enforcement officers ensure that bylaws passed by council are being followed. This process is important for legitimizing the policy direction that council wishes to undertake. Bylaw enforcement officers further reinforce an acceptable standard of living and behavior within the communities that we serve, and we help create strong communities by forging relationships and alleviating conflict between neighbors. Bylaw enforcement officers help de-escalate escalating situations within the municipalities, and we help mitigate risk to the municipality should a particular situation result in civil litigation. Bylaw enforcement officers serve as community ambassadors as well for visitors coming in from outside the municipality. What role does council play in bylaw enforcement? Council plays a huge role in the day-to-day activities of Malahide's bylaw enforcement officer. Council can direct the bylaw enforcement officer to conduct research, bring about new bylaws to regulate activities within the township for council's approval. The council can identify community problems that require attention and direct the bylaw enforcement officer to come back with a report related to the best way to address that problem. And council can also direct the bylaw enforcement officer to come back with policies or procedures related to the work that I am doing. Council cannot become directly involved by themselves in an ongoing investigation or request specific information related to an ongoing investigation, as bylaw files are governed by the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Note, if a councillor were to become personally involved in a bylaw enforcement matter, they could become a subpoenable witness should the issue wind up in court or in civil litigation. Bylaw enforcement officers also conduct regular reviews of existing bylaws and conduct reports to council as to whether they might be amended, repealed, or replaced with something more current. Next steps, in terms of Malahide's approach, we are going to be developing an implementation plan, myself in conjunction with the CIO, that considers goals and priorities for bylaw enforcement, public awareness in traditional and transitional period, legal and financial risks, and constraints of internal resources such as planning and building. Thank you very much for having me. That's all I have. It's been happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Off to a great start. Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Wilson.
Through you, Madam Mayor, since we haven't had a bylaw enforcement officer for a while, I'm assuming you'll have quite a list to get at. Good luck, and I may have a few to add on to it for you.
Deputy Mayor Widner.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. The remedial action you explained, I know we've talked about that in our previous years, but that's a last resort, I would imagine. You're allowed to take problems away from the property, and do you have to store them and catalog them? We were told you had to do all that, catalog them, keep them for 2 years and return them if need be. And so what's your take on this? I'd like to hear it. I'm interested.
Thank you. And through Madam Mayor. I don't believe we do it, like, typically it's in relation to a property standards issue. So typically, refuse or garbage and things of that nature. So typically there's a process that I typically like to follow related to notice and working with owners to achieve voluntary compliance. In the event that notice or that I don't achieve voluntary compliance, then we would proceed with remedial action as an absolute last resort. I tend to have discussions with property owners related to uses of items and what their intent is, whether they're going to fix things up, things of that nature. But yes, an absolute last resort. But I don't believe we have to keep those items.
Follow up?
Yeah, thank you. What's the success rate when you go, we've got a few that are been that way forever, right? And what's your success rate with this? I mean, it's tough. It's a tough thing to do. I know that. So
Historically, I would say my success rate is generally around 90 to 95%. However, whatever that looks like. And so success may not always be voluntary, but I always make every possible attempt to achieve that. Yeah.
good luck. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Council has identified this as an area, priority area, and so we want to sort of improve our culture of compliance. But I think, as you mentioned, this will take a bit of a transition. So I think it's a bit of a, go slow to go fast, and eventually get to where we want to be. So I appreciate, we will need your expertise in guiding this transition and getting us to the standard that we want. So thank you so much for being here. Councilor Lewis.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. To Steve, are you gonna have days that you'll be in Malahide that we'll be aware of, like where you'll be at an office or not? And are the calls gonna go directly to you? Or like, is staff gonna have that changed over, do you know, so that instead of it going to Scott? Because I think right now, if we still call, they go through to Scott Sutherland. So I'm just wondering if that's gonna happen soon or how that's gonna happen.
Good clarification on communication and how to reach you.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor. So currently I do have a Malahide email address. I'm also set up with a cell phone. People can reach me direct. I have been responding to complaints, inquiries. I've done some time in the Malahide town office. I've met with people personally and discussed bylaw enforcement issues. I think in conjunction with the CAO, there's an opportunity to work on which days I'm going to be in Malahide. But right now it's based on needs. And so I'm in Malahide a little bit more frequently now.
And that information is on our website, like your number and email. So, okay, great. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, we can receive the presentation. Clerk Adams.
That the presentation of Stephen Miller, bylaw enforcement officer, be received.
Mover and seconder. Counselor Wilson, Counselor Lewis, all in favor? Carried. We don't have any reports or outside boards correspondence. We have 3 items. Any comments? Seeing none, we can receive correspondence.
That the following 3 items be received.
Mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Widner, Counselor Leach, all in favor? Carried. Any other business? Deputy Mayor Widner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, always with the traffic, but here we go again. Imperial Road between Glen Cole and then College. We ended up having a passing lane or a turning lane put in a couple years ago. It really worked well. It helped for Clover Mead, helped for some businesses, helped for the residents. But it's turned into a passing lane. And I've had probably a dozen complaints and close calls. I guess first of all, we need to have it verified it's not a passing lane, but it says, I did get a hold of Mr. Duchek at the county about some more, maybe writing something on the pavement. He says, well, Mark, there's already 10 signs up there. So we're talking about signage tonight. They don't mean a damn a lot of the time. That's the frustrating part. 10 signs that say no passing. And they're doing it all the time. So I don't know what we can do. Can we get increased policing out there? Maybe that big sign, can we have it from the police that says we can put a message on it? I don't know that. It's happening all the time. I'm getting passed all the time. And I mean, it's just people turning into their laneways and all of a sudden there's a car heading towards them at 100K. You know, what do you do, right? So something's going to happen, but anyway. And we also get a lot of complaints lately about tailgating, and speeding is still very prevalent. Tailgating is getting to be, there's some people out there that could work for Paul Rydell in the old days. And if anybody knows who Paul Rydell was, like 5 feet off your bumper all the time. This is ridiculous. And that needs to be clamped down on. So anyway, I'd like to thank the counselors here that called the county counselors and expressed their concerns about the Imperial. That I'm getting some feedback from that. So keep it up. Thank you.
So any specific requests then, or I don't know, Mr. Godby, did you have a comment or we'll talk to the county? How do you want to proceed?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. What I can do, I wrote myself a little note here. It's something I can have a chat with Peter about to see what they're thinking at the county level, as well as something we could reach out to the community policing committees and our contacts at the OPP just to kind of give them that extra little nudge. Maybe they can look at increased enforcement or something like that. Unfortunately, that's probably about as much as we can do at this time, but I think that collectively as council, it sounds like you're continuing to express your concerns about some of these things. And from a staff level, we can do the same thing, and hopefully it'll eventually yield some results.
So Deputy Mayor Widner, go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to follow up, at least with the OPP that we have it in writing. We have concern. Is that possible? And I've already spoken to Duchek. He says, what else can I do? I got 10 signs up there, and he's not wrong, but I don't know. But maybe that policing sign, if we're allowed to put a message on it, that may help just to educate people, because I just don't think they know. But if you look at the lines on the road, you're really not supposed to be doing what you're doing. So anyway, any help would be appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, so basically we will explore solutions with the county and report back on suggestions to
It's
address
something in writing to
between
the OPP.
and
got it.
plus correspondence to OPP.
That'd be
Okay.
great.
Clerk Adams, were you able to capture something? And while we do that, Deputy Mayor Widner, regarding tailgating, did you have a specific request, or is just conveying to the community that should try
Actually,
and not?
both would probably work, but I mean, the policing, if they can nail, I don't know. I mean, the police can't be everywhere. I know that. To me, driving is getting a lot worse. There's a lot of bad habits out there. I mean, I was on 401 last night and I could not believe the tailgating out there. Guy's going 120K and there one guy passed me with a truck. That's fine. I looked behind him. Are you towing this car? And this young lady with a BMW was just like, wow, you couldn't walk between them. And we need to increase, surveillance out there. I don't know how to do it, but some education would be great because it's not safe and it's getting worse. Maybe I'm just getting older and grumpier about the traffic, but I don't think so. No, that's right. You're not far behind. Come on.
So perhaps we can just add that as a concern in the correspondence to the OPP as various, dangerous driving. Right. Clerk Adams, did I buy you enough time?
That Malahide Council directs staff to contact County of Elgin Council in regards to the turning lane on Imperial Road between Glencullen Line and College Line. And that Malahide Council directs staff to send correspondence to the OPP to ensure they are aware of this safety concern.
And just to clarify, Mr. Gobby, do you want it to just contact the engineer as opposed to council of the county?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm good with whatever council's desire. I can draft something to go to county council, or I can draft it just to staff.
And Clerk Adams is clarifying that I think the county has expressed that it would be better if the request that we work with the county goes to council, and then staff can receive direction from county council to act on it the same way we're doing with you. Fair enough. Well done. So based on that resolution, we have a mover and seconder. Deputy Mayor Widner, Councillor Glinski, all in favor? Carried. Bylaws. Go ahead.
So the following bylaws be considered read a first, second, and third reading and properly signed and sealed. Bylaw number 23-45, JL Ferguson Drain, third reading, and bylaw number 23-56, Emergency Management Program and Emergency Response Plan.
Mover and seconder, Councillor Cerna, Councillor Lewis, all in favor? Carried. And we have a couple of items to be discussed in closed session, so we have a resolution to move into closed session.
The council move into closed session at 9:03 PM pursuant to section 239-2 of the Municipal Act as amended to discuss the following: labor relations or employee negotiations matters relating to the Development Service Department staffing, and a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board in relation to the EECC governance.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Cerna, Councillor Leach, all in favor? Carried. Okay, welcome back. We're now out of closed session and may I have the resolution, please.
The Malahide Council provided direction to staff with matters relating to the Development Services Department staffing and relating to a position plan or procedure relating to the EECC governance.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Cerna, Councillor Lewis, all in favor? Carried. Confirmatory bylaw.
That bylaw number 23-55 being a confirmatory bylaw be given first, second, and third readings and properly signed and sealed.
Mover and seconder. Councillor Cerna, Councillor Wilson, all in favor? Opposed? And that's carried. Adjournment.
The council adjourned its meeting at 9:36 PM to meet again on September 7th, 2023 at 7:30 PM.
Mover and seconder, Deputy Mayor Widner, Councillor Glinski, all in favor? Carried. Have a nice evening.